A couple of years ago or so, I came across this video called Insight by Kez Van, and I'm not even going to try to say his last name because I'm just going to butcher it, Jr., about Brad Bird, that really opened my eyes to him as a director and really made me appreciate his work.
The filmmakers I most admire recognize the value of teasing. People are in such a rush to get the action sequences going fast that they forget that there's pleasure to be had in the sneaking around part.
It's a brilliant celebration of the work he's done with voiceovers of some of his interviews mixed in. I've seen other videos like this before, but none have really stuck with me as this one has. His portfolio is incredibly impressive. But before reaching the heights that he's reached now, he didn't actually start out as a director, at least not formally. So in this video, I'm going to go through all the twists and turns and achievements of the animation star Brad Bird. Philip Bradley Bird was born on September 24th, 1957 in Kalispell, Montana, to Marjorie and Philip Bird, but he spent most of his childhood in Oregon. His first venture into the arts was at the age of 3.
My very first drawings were sequential. They were meant to be seen in a certain order. And I would show these primitive drawings like this and tell the story and go like this.
Like a storyboard.
Yeah, like a storyboard.
So naturally, he became very obsessed with movies and was one of the few people at the time who had watched films more than once in cinemas. That continued right through his childhood and went to the next level once he saw The Jungle Book at the age of 11.
Look for the bare necessities, the simple bare necessities.
After having watched the film in cinemas, something just clicked with him. And luckily for him, there was actually an animator in the car with him on the way home.
It didn't connect with me that when the panther moved, it wasn't just any creature, it was a cat. And it wasn't just a cat, it was a panther. And it wasn't just a panther, it was a panther with a stuffy attitude. And I realized that was somebody's job, to figure out how a stuffy panther would move.
Would move, yeah.
And I thought, that is a blanking cool job, you know? And that maybe being an adult is not gonna be dull. Maybe it's infinitely interesting. And so I said, how do you do that? And one of the guys in the car, and it's the only time I've been in the car with that guy. He was a friend of the family somehow, but that's the only time we were together. I said, how do they do that? And he said, well, they do a lot of drawings and each drawing is slightly different. I said, I know that. I said, how do I do it?
With the help of Brad Bird's dad and the knowledge of the animator that was with him in the car, Brad Bird and his dad set up what was essentially a mini animation studio within his parents' basement, and Brad Bird got to work on making stuff. At the age of 11, he got ready to create his very first animated short film, which was an adaptation of The Tortoise and the Hare. Throughout the process, he was inspired by some Disney cells that he had bought at Disneyland that he had above the desk. He also had some animation books that helped him along a bit too, and of course, there was all of Disney's library that really inspired him too. He started by drawing on chalkboard, but
Chalkboard bullshit, no.
so he switched over to using pencil and paper, which was so much better. It was very much a struggle creating these animated shorts though, as you can imagine, because you need so many pictures just to make a single second of animation. But once the inspiration of the cells and the books kind of stopped, it was his parents that kept pushing him to go on while he was working on the animated short. And halfway through, Brad Bird was pretty much ready to give up, but his mum knew exactly what to say to keep him on track and keep him going until he could finish his short. After 3 years of working on it, Brad Bird had a final animated short. He had something that he could take and show to the animation studios that he wanted to work with in the future. But before he went that far, he started off by entering the short into a nationwide Kodak movie competition and ended up getting several awards from the competition. Pushed along by that win, he then turned his sights to the big players in the animation industry.
You should always go to the top first. Go to the very top, and then if they say no, you go to the next best. And then you go to the next best.
Through his short, Brad Bird had impressed the people over at Disney so much that they wanted to find a mentor for him. So Disney didn't have a proper mentoring company at the time, pretty much because all of the original animators from when Disney started were still there, and many companies just can't think past their next quarter, let alone someone's retirement. But they still wanted to take Brad Bird on board, so they came up with something, and they entrusted Milt Kahl, one of the 9 old men, to be the mentor for Brad Bird. Milt wasn't the best of teachers, but he was great at what he did, and he was great at giving tough, constructive feedback that Brad could then use to improve his work in the future and make his work the best it could be. This continued throughout school until he graduated from Corvallis High School in 1975, and then he made his way to Cal Arts, where he really made the most of the resources there. After that, he finally got into Disney as an animator on The Fox and the Hound, where he was working alongside huge players in the animation industry, such as John Lasseter, John Musker, and he now had a new mentor called Eric Larson, who was another one of the 9 old men, and who was known to be a lot more gentler and warmer than Milt. But the video is only halfway done. You know that this isn't the happy ending that ends the video, because this wasn't the same Disney that Brad Bird grew up with. He wasn't happy at all by the fact that Disney didn't maintain the integrity of their characters by putting the characters in spin-offs and shows and things like that. And let's face it, he didn't exactly join on the best film either. This film is so boring. So, in the mid-1980s, he ended up being fired for rocking the boat, and Brad Bird was now stuck. He had reached the heights that he wanted to reach, but he found that Disney just wasn't good enough for him, and they weren't up to the standards that he was looking for. But then he remembered how he started all those years ago. He had, and he still could, create his own stuff, so that's exactly what he did. One of these ideas caught the attention of Steven Spielberg, who sent over a small sum of money to storyboard it, which could mean absolutely anything coming from a millionaire. With this small amount of money though, Brad Bird hired Tim Burton to create the character designs, and they got to work on the storyboards. Spielberg liked the completed storyboards and the character designs, but didn't take it on immediately as a theatrical short. He instead came back to Brad a few years later to include a series of the shorts, all put together as an episode called Family Dog, for one of his Amazing Stories episodes. And from this, he slowly started to make his way back up again, first by drafting a screenplay called Batteries Not Included for Spielberg, and then guest animating for a show called The Tracy Ullman Show, and from that going to consult on a little known show that was a spin-off. You may know about it. Oh, and by the way, fun fact, the current design of Sideshow Bob was actually done by Brad Bird. But all of this was just Brad Bird getting started before he moved over to Turner Featured Animation in the late 1990s with ambitions to create a feature-length animated film. He was done being a contributor and an animator. He now wanted to be a director. Brad Bird joined Turner Animations, the studio behind the hugely enjoyable Cats Don't Dance. Like, seriously, if you haven't seen the film, definitely do. It's a really fun film with very creative visuals and great music, and it's so criminally underrated. Anyway though, with the hopes that the studio would eventually greenlight his film, he started work on a sci-fi noir film called Reagan. The studio was mixed on this film though. They thought it would be too intense for younger viewers. But this was shelved anyway when Turner was bought by Warner, and Warner just denied it outright. But they did give Brad Bird the opportunity to go and make something else that was more PG, which is when he turned his attention to a book called The Iron Giant. The Iron Giant was greenlit by Warner, and Brad Bird got to work on making the film. Warner Brothers had some, let's just say, questionable recommendations for this film. For example, they wanted to turn this gritty story that's about coming to terms with death and understanding it into an upbeat musical at one point, and they also wanted to give the Iron Giant lips and have him dance and stuff. Brad Bird, quite rightly, said no to all of that, and instead pulled inspiration from films such as 1951's The Day the Earth Stood Still for the story itself, and gave the Iron Giant the simpler, fully metallic design that's in the final film. This film didn't do well at the time. Warner didn't promote it well, but it has since gained a big cult following and had a 24-hour marathon showing on Cartoon Network from the 2nd of July 2002 to the 3rd of July 2002. Next on the list was a feature-length film based on the Curious George books, but he only managed to get the first draft of that film done because he soon got a massive call that was going to make a big impact on his career from none other than the biggest CGI animation company that was just emerging and had the distribution power of Walt Disney. John Lasseter, then Chief Creative Officer at Pixar Animation Studios, used to be a friend of Brad Bird and wanted to make him a part of the rapidly growing CGI-focused animation company. Brad Bird jumped at the opportunity, ditching the Curious George idea and moving on to make a film that would be extremely hard to create, The Incredibles. This was Brad Bird's chance. He was at a top animation company, almost entirely in charge of directing a film, entirely in his vision. He'd finally made it, and he sure made the most of it, spending the time and money to make the film as good and as realistic feeling as possible.
You're constantly trying to get the audience into the state of feeling and how things feel rather than how things are. You are trying to get to a very primal, very simple, I think nourishing thing, which is indulging in the human aspect of being alive.
To achieve this, he had extras walking around the room all over the place, and he pushed his team to not just make good results, but to make the best results that they can make.
People have told me that I can be demanding, but I think I'm enthusiastically demanding.
He even lent his voice to voicing Edna Mode in the film, initially as material to show to a potential actor, but in the end as the actual final recording in the film. They definitely made the right decision to keep his voice in.
Fine. I will also fix the hobo suit.
You're the best of the best,
Yes,
E.
I know, darling. I know.
Finally, in 2002, Brad Bird got to experience the success that he didn't get to experience with The Iron Giant. The Incredibles was a massive critical and box office success, grossing close to $261.5 million domestically and $631 million worldwide, all on a $92 million budget. It also won many awards at the Annies and won Best Animated Feature and Best Sound Editing at the 2005 Academy Awards. And the successes kept coming as Brad turned from being an underdog animator, consultant and director who was trying to make his way to being a major name in the animation industry who was now passing on some of his advice and wisdom to others. His hard work was finally starting to pay off, big time. After The Incredibles, Brad Bird was contacted by Tom Cruise and was invited over to his place. While they were there, they sat and mostly just talked about movies, but the idea came up of them both making a Mission Impossible film together. And again, Brad Bird jumped at the opportunity, and after making Ratatouille, which again was a massive success, he made the slight detour to the live action realm with Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. Yes, that is the one that had Tom Cruise hanging off the side of the Burj Khalifa, by the way. The shoot was a bit hectic, with many of the scenes having to be planned as they went along, but it was actually a relatively easy transition from CGI animation, since a lot of the concept from his animated films translated very well over to the real world. The film was also another success critically and financially, bringing in over $209 million domestically and close to $695 million worldwide on a $145 million budget. But that success couldn't last forever when Brad Bird got to making his next live action film, Tomorrowland. The film broke the streak of big successes for him, with it bringing in $206.6 million worldwide on a $170 million budget, which may seem like a profit at first, but it did put it at a loss when you take into account the huge marketing costs that came with it. It also had a mixed critical reception and is one of the less talked about films from Brad Bird. But Brad Bird's gotten quite good at putting the films that he's worked on behind him and moving on to the next thing. And he instead likes to learn from each film and use that knowledge in the future when making new films.
It's more that each film teaches me something about the medium. You know, I feel like I've studied a lot for a long time. I've worked in it for a long part of my life, and yet it's still mysterious to me.
Having a failure doesn't really stop you if you're passionate enough though, and you believe in yourself enough. And so when an idea came to Brad Bird about a sequel to The Incredibles that he actually thought would be worthy of making a sequel for, he got the team back from the first Incredibles movie and started work on Incredibles 2. He had a blast creating the sequel, and once again it was a massive success, both critically and financially, grossing over $1.24 billion worldwide on a $200 million budget. By not giving up on the value of his art and not pandering to everything that Disney wanted to do in his early career, Brad Bird is now at the point where his voice can reach millions of people out there, and he can make films in exactly the way that he wants to make them. And he can also inspire a whole load of animators to really respect the animation medium, which is absolutely not a genre.
Next time I hear, "Oh, what's it like working in the animation genre?" I'm gonna punch that person.
And I think this video by Keys Van Jr. beautifully sums up that life and the entertainment he gives, not only through his films but also through his talks. I have no doubt that as this video containing his work and life lessons inspired me, it will help many others to pick up their pen again and inspire them to become the next great animator, or direct their next film that much better than they would have done before. And hopefully go on to pass on their knowledge to the next generation, just as Brad Bird has passed on the knowledge he has learnt from when he was growing up from his mentors in animation. So to end off this video, I want to give a few video recommendations. The first one is obviously Insights, the video that I have mentioned throughout this video. The second one is the TIFF interview that Brad Bird has done. This video was incredibly helpful when it came to making this video, and it's just a really entertaining watch anyway, so I would absolutely recommend it. I would also recommend going and watching Brad Bird's films, as silly as that sounds. They are pretty much all really good. And I'm also cheekily going to recommend the whole Mission Impossible series. I do fully believe that this is the best spy film series that there is out there, way better than James Bond. It's just so good seeing Tom Cruise doing his own stunts and stuff like that. Ghost Protocol is brilliant too, but all of them are. I would just recommend the whole thing. It just gets better as it goes along, I feel. And yeah, that's basically it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Keep brightening up the world with your art. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.